Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Clockwork Goblin painting table. I'm Russ and this is going to be a series of tutorials about painting and modelling for War Machine and Hordes. The motto of the painting table is very much going to be build it, paint it and play it. This is going to be about building armies for gaming on the table, not necessarily for display, but getting good looking figures onto the battlefield. I thought I'd start today by talking you through some of the equipment and kit that I use for painting and things that you might find useful. Some of this you might know, some of this you may not know and may be new to you. So let's take a look at the kind of things that I'm using on my table today. And the first thing I want to talk about is lighting. Light is essential to good painting. You need to be able to see what you're doing, especially if you've undercoated black, but generally the detail on a model can only be picked out by good light. I'm painting using an angle poise lamp with a fluorescing daylight bulb in. I use an angle poise because it means I can find the best angle and project the light onto the model to be able to see what I need to see, and a daylight bulb gives me good quality light and lets me see the colours really clearly on my models. If you can paint in natural daylight, that's excellent. However, for most of us, that's not a realistic proposition most of the time. You might live in Finland or Alaska or one of those places with 24-hour sunlight, but for everybody else, get yourself a good quality daylight bulb and you'll be set. Next up, I'm going to talk about the paints that I use. As you can see, I'm mainly using P3, Vallejo and GW range paints, and each has got its own pros and cons. GW, main benefit, they're normally the easiest of all the paints to get hold of. This may not be the case for you, but it certainly is for me. And I love their wash range. Their washes are fantastic colours. They apply really well, they shade really nicely, and Devlin Mud is a miracle paint. You can use that wash to shade pretty much anything. Their main paint range is solid. It's had a long time to be developed. It's a little expensive for what you get, but I've got some old ones that have lasted me years, and you just can't go wrong with Games Workshop paint. I've got some Vallejo in the background. I do use these. Their metallics are fantastic. Some of their other colours less so. They do have a tendency to separate quite badly in the pots, and they also have a tendency to be a little bit watery at times. So I bought about half a dozen of these a little while ago, and I'll probably only be using the metallics in the future. But you may find that you enjoy using them. Fantastic if you do. Finally, I've got some P3 there, and they're probably my favourites. Really rate these. The colours are great, the coverage is great, they thin down really nicely, great paints. Wish they weren't in those pots with the horrible lids that gam up with dried paint, but you can't have everything. So P3, top paint, GW, and then Vallejo. Can't talk about other manufacturers because I haven't used them. Brief chat about my brushes that I use. I use GW, I use P3, I use Winsor & Newton, and I use some really cheap brushes, acrylic synthetic ones that are great for dry brushing and painting scenery as well. GW brushes. Some of my brushes are years old, some of them don't seem to last more than a couple of weeks. If you get a good quality GW brush, it's a great painting brush. The problem is, it's really hard to judge, and their quality doesn't always seem to be very consistent. The second type of brush I use a lot of are the P3 ones. I have a studio work brush, which I do about 90% of my painting with. I absolutely love this brush. It's great quality, holds a good point, fantastic brush. I also have one of their fine work brushes, which has never yet been used. The reason for this is I also use Winsor & Newton Series 7, and I have a 00 which does all of my detail work, and I love that brush so much. The basic advice for brushes I would give is buy the best quality brushes that you can afford to buy, keep a few workhorse brushes of slightly cheaper quality for rough work, and look after your brushes well. More on that shortly. For mixing my paint, I've experimented with wet palettes, didn't think much to them. I've tried little plastic palettes that you get from art shops. I've tried plasticard, I've tried glass, I've tried ceramic tiles. I've never found a better palette than this Winsor & Newton tear-off acrylic and oil palette pad. Basically, it's sheets of sort of plasticized paper that's suitable for mixing paint on, and when you're done, you just tear it off, throw it in the bin, you got a fresh one underneath. You get about 50-60 sheets for a few quid, and if, like me, you've spent endless hours cleaning pallets and then picking bits of acrylic paint out of your sink, you will really appreciate the fact that you just strip it off, throw it in the bin, and have a fresh pallet every day. This one has lasted me now about 3 months, and I'd say I was about 3/4 of the way through it, so I probably only need 3 of these a year for all of my painting. It's absolutely fantastic and thoroughly recommended. I've also got some tissue paper there just for wiping brushes off on. Very handy for cleaning brushes, getting water out of them, and of course dry brushing. You want to be able to remove the paint, and you need something with a high surface texture to flick the paint out of the bristles, and you'll find that tissue paper or toilet roll is absolutely the best for this. Okay, last 2 things I want to briefly touch on. One is a bottle of Games Workshop water effects. You can buy this from other manufacturers, and I strongly suspect it is in fact just acrylic gloss varnish repackaged. I find it really handy. Yes, you can use it as water effects on bases and things, which is great, but also if you've matte varnished models, there's areas you want to have shiny and pick out a little bit of detail on. It makes an excellent brush on gloss varnish. And finally, it mixes really well with red ink or any colour really. I use it a lot with red gore to get a spatter on liquid effect. You can get spattered on gore, slime, corrosion, all manner of nice liquidy details spattered onto the surfaces of your models. That's a technique I'll look at later when I'm looking at sort of painting gore or venom. So quite a handy thing to have around. The other thing I've got there is a pod of the Masters brush cleaner and preserver, which is something I came upon quite recently after years of just painting my models and washing my brushes in water. I recently discovered this stuff, and I've been really taken by how effective it is. So taken, in fact, that in a moment I'm going to demonstrate it to you, because if you are going to buy good quality brushes, they are an investment and it's worth maintaining them as long as possible. So let's take a look at how that stuff works. Okay, here we go. I've got slightly lower level lighting here because I had the lighting turned up really brightly with my lamp and it was making it difficult to see the pale colours, but here's a brush, there it is, look, and I'm going to give it a rinse in some water and just wipe it on this tissue. You can see it's coming out fairly clean, there's no real residue there, so that brush is about as clean as water will get it. I'm going to give it a rinse, I'm going to rub it in the brush cleaner. And already, I don't know how clearly the camera is going to pick this up, you probably can see that now, the brush cleaner is removing a great deal of paint just by brushing. I'm not scrubbing, there's no pressure there, the brush cleaner is just removing a great deal of dried paint particles, little speckles in there, and a lot of red paint. Now this brush was used to paint red last night, it is now the following day, so this paint has been setting on this brush for about 15-16 hours, so this is really completely cured. But you can see that coming out there. If I wipe that off on the tissue, there's a lot of paint around the metal ferrule coming out and a lot of paint coming out of those bristles. Basically I can keep doing this until 2 things happen. Either the brush becomes completely clean or I get bored, whichever comes first. The other thing about this stuff is once you have got the brush completely clean, the same formulation that they're cleaning the brush with, whatever magical fairy dust that's cleaning the brush, also conditions the bristles and makes them last longer. I think that's probably enough of that, but we can see now my brush has had a significant amount of paint removed from it just then. So there we go. Masters paintbrush cleaner and preserver. It's fab. Buy yours today. Okay, that concludes a quick walk through the basic kit that I'm using for painting with. Nothing too earth-shattering there, but hopefully useful to know about in terms of when I'm painting and talking about things, you'll at least have an idea of the various things that I'm using. The next tutorial will be all about getting a model ready for painting, making some choices, and then we'll be cracking on with some different techniques, which are something I'm really looking forward to doing. I hope you've enjoyed this short tutorial. It's my first one, so hopefully if there's anything in here you didn't like, things will get better, and I'll look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you very much for listening, thank you very much for watching, and good luck with the painting.